This segment of Money Matters Boston is brought to you by Flagship Wealth Management.
Welcome back to Money Matters Boston. I am pleased to introduce John Canally, Chief Economist at LPL Financial, the largest broker-dealer, independent broker-dealer in the country. There's 13,000 advisors that you and your team are responsible for. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and we try to do the best we can. So hopefully it'll continue in 2013.
Well, speaking of that, we were here, you and I had an interview just 6 months back, and we talked about where we thought the market would be in 6 months, and we talked a little bit about the fiscal cliff. This isn't a gotcha moment. When we go to the tape, we'll watch it, and then maybe we'll comment on it. You ready for this?
Fair enough.
All right. You talk about the Senate race being almost as important as the presidential race.
Yes.
Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, because in this case, gridlock is not good. So we've had gridlock here for the last couple of years. You've had a Democratic president, a House controlled by the GOP, and the Senate mostly controlled by the Democrats, but it's pretty close. I think the best outcome for markets would be to ungridlock things, to get one party in control of both the House and the Senate. It's not likely that the Democrats are going to take over the House because it's just too big of a climb. I think they would have to make up 25 seats. That's probably not going to happen.
Sure.
So the best outcome for the markets would be if they can pick up enough seats to win the Senate, which is likely. I think it's 4 or 5 or 6 seats, and that could happen.
Ungridlock things, good for the market. Gridlock, bad. What are your thoughts on that clip?
We didn't quite get there. Democrats actually picked up a couple seats in the Senate. So basically the same actors we have this year are going to go right into next year. Not much has changed. We went through a whole campaign season, spent billions and billions of dollars, and ended up right where we started.
I think you're probably better off spent elsewhere.
Probably so. So what we're faced with now is getting the fiscal cliff resolved, and it's basically the same folks in power. Let's hope they can make some better decisions.
All right, let's go beyond hope. Our viewers are actually hoping we can give them more than hope in this holiday season. There's 2 weeks left. Now, I know you've got some probabilities on what could happen. Give us the probability you think is most likely to happen where it comes to the fiscal cliff.
I think the probability is that you somewhat go over the fiscal cliff. You get a couple of things resolved. You get a partial hit from the fiscal cliff. That might shave 1% off of GDP. So if you do nothing, that's a 3.5% hit to GDP.
Which is running at, what, 1.5%, 2% now?
So that's a recession, basically. So if they can come to some agreement that it removes some of the uncertainties, but we still get some of the hits, some of the taxes go up, some of the spending cuts go in, but it still gets us about a 1% hit to GDP. That probably slows economic growth down to near zero in the first quarter. The offset to that is we're going to get some rebuild from Hurricane Sandy. That's going to lift it. So first quarter GDP looks weak either way, probably somewhere around 1%. But what it sets you up for is getting the longer term deal in place.
All right, so your team, both you and your team, what is that probability in percentage terms? If we go down the middle, we do have some cuts, but we do have some tax increases. That in the middle phase?
That's about a 55 to 65% chance of happening. So, you know, and I think right now we're 2 weeks away. That looks like that's probably in the works. You're not going to get any kind of grand bargain in the next 2 weeks. There's just too much to do. In other words, you're not going to get tax reform. You're not going to get loopholes closed. You're not going to get some big deal that's going to cut the budget by $4 trillion in the next 10 years. That's just not going to happen. We don't have enough time. What's likely to get done is something just to get us to early next year where they can sit down and have a little more time to try to help get the longer term deal in place.
Now, what do we do in 2013? You talked about the GDP slowing by 1%. Are there certain sectors of the market that benefit from that, or don't benefit to a less detriment, if you will?
Yeah, I think right now every sector is hurting from the uncertainty being created by this fiscal cliff, whether it's consumer discretionary or technology or materials. They're all being hurt. One is being helped is sort of volatility. If you're invested in volatility, you're probably doing okay. But removing that uncertainty just by itself might help to lift all boats early next year.
I was going to ask you that. I mean, businesses are going into year end having to cut people, having to lay people off because they don't know where their tax rates are going to be. So isn't that in and of itself a stimulus? If we can avoid this fiscal cliff in one way or another, do you think they'll put the money back into the market?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a two-step process. One is just to get us beyond the fiscal cliff, so get us beyond December 31st, January 1st, get some fix there. But then the longer-term issue becomes, can we put a tax code in place that's going to last for more than 6 months? So we've been living kind of paycheck to paycheck with the tax code for the last couple of years. There's all these artificial cliffs and artificial barriers. what businesses and what consumers want is certainty for a long period of time, 5 years, 10 years. Here's what my tax rates are. Here's what the loopholes are. That's what they want. They want certainty. I think once that certainty gets put into place, I think there is a pretty good possibility that we can ramp up the economy from, let's say, 2%, which is probably where we've been at in 2012, to up to 3%, maybe even 3.5% if we can unleash some of that uncertainty and put it to work.
Does that unleashing, if you will, what does that do for the the total market growth for next year? What is your prediction? Last year it was mid to high single digits, which I think you're pretty much dead on. What do you think for 2013?
Well, I think in our base path, you get a 5% gain in stocks, 5 to 10% gain in stocks. But if you get that unleashing, if you get our bull path, and we can put a long-term deal in place to reduce the budget deficit, cut some spending, raise some revenues, that might get you to a 20% gain. And I think people are not really thinking about that. Now the other side of that is if we let this linger on till we hit the debt ceiling again. That's the real issue. So debt ceiling is coming up again.
Now that's in March, if I'm correct?
February, March, we might hit the debt ceiling. At that same time, the government runs out of funding. If we are still in February, March talking about that, that might be the bear case. That might be that we're down 20% on stocks. I think ultimately it all does get resolved, but between now and then, there's just going to be a whole lot of uncertainty. So I think the first step is getting over the fiscal cliff, and then setting the stage for that longer-term deal that could indeed lift us to a path where we're up 20% in stocks.
Well, I have it hot off the presses, the path of least resistance put out by your research team. I have to tell you that I'm proud to be a part of LPL. I use that in my practice. I know my clients have certainly participated and have really valued you and your team's research. So again, thank you for that. John Canally, Chief Strategist and Economist at LPL Financial. Hey, stay tuned. More Money Matters coming your way in just a minute.